Hello, and welcome to Collie Conversations, the podcast that's all about transforming your life with your Border Collie. I'm Gemma Fisher, your expert in all things collie. Whether you're dealing with reactivity, recall struggles, or just looking to understand your collie better, you've come to the right place. I'm here to help you turn those frustrating behaviours into wins with practical advice and real life solutions. If you haven't already, head over to our Facebook group for extra support and tips for collie owners just like you. Today, we're going to be discussing noise sensitivity. So grab a cup of tea and get ready to take some notes. Let's get started. So first and foremost, I wanted to address the difference between sensitive and oversensitive. Okay. So as you're probably aware if you've been to any of my webinars before, collies were bred to be alert to the sights and sounds in order to be able to do their job. So noticing sounds is fairly normal. It's really what they choose to do about it, which can start to cause a problem. Because obviously, if your Border Collie is listening to sounds outside of your home, or they're listening to sounds if they're in your garden and they're noticing what the next door neighbour is doing and they start barking, that starts to cause us a little bit of an issue. So one of the things I think is worth looking at is how responses to sounds could be looked at on a spectrum. All right. So if we have on one end of the spectrum, you have my Cocker Spaniel Impact. All right, so because of the nature of her breeding, she is pretty calm and unbothered about sounds generally. Sounds don't tend to bother her. But then on the other end of the spectrum, if you look at my old dog Kai before he died, he was extremely distressed about fireworks noise. So and he could not really be comforted. The best I could hope for was if I took him out for a drive in the car, that would help improve things for him because at least he would be in the safety of the car as he saw it. So on that end of the spectrum, you've got kind of extremely distressed, cannot be comforted, what is called phonophobia. Now, the other thing that is interesting about sound is the question mark over whether it's sound or a vibration that the dog is responding to. So a big vibration such as thunder or fireworks causes a large sound wave that transmits a lot of energy. And one of the experiences that I've had with in my life is that one of my Border Collies, Jade, was diagnosed with early onset deafness. And despite being functionally deaf, okay, so and she's a lot older now. She was diagnosed when she was 5, so she would be completely deaf now. She still gets very upset at thunder or fireworks. And of course, she can't hear. And you would think, well, if you can't hear, then surely there's not a problem. But as I say, that vibration is obviously the thing that is causing her to react, and she's aware of that. The other thing about thunderstorms, particularly, is a barometric pressure, or the weight of the air, falls when the air is humid and it rises when it's dry. So when barometric pressure changes, it can create pressure between the sinuses, and it results in a chemical imbalance and headache. I don't know if I certainly suffer from this, that if I know a storm is coming, I can start to get quite headachy. So I can definitely relate to this. And if you're aware of that, then you'll know a shift in the weather can either it can make an existing headache or migraine worse, or as I say, bring one on. I always think it's quite helpful to think about how this stuff relates to humans as well. So noise sensitivity in humans is called hyperacusis, and this is where everyday sounds seem louder to you than they should. So you might be affected by sounds like somebody jingling coins, or a barking dog, car engine, someone chewing, or somebody using the vacuum cleaner. Now, all of those everyday sounds, we just sort of take for granted, and we do this thing where they just sort of fade out into the background. But if you are particularly noise sensitive, those things will really bother you. And as I say, that would be described in humans as an oversensitivity. Now, other reasons for heightened sensitivity, which are important to bear in mind, because these are things that we can't necessarily train for. Migraine triggers that might affect dogs include certain medications, stress. So if we know that the dog is affected by lots of different triggers in their home environment or outside, those things that cause stress could influence that. Sensory stimulation like bright lights or strong smells. So one of the questions that I will ask my VIP students, my one-to-one students, when I start working with them, is do they use things like lots of household cleaners, or candles or plugins, those sorts of things, because those strong smells can really affect our dogs. Other things include things like sleep changes. So if the dog is not getting good quality sleep, that's something to bear in mind. Again, we've talked about if the weather changes, that can have an effect on barometric pressure. Um, Things like skipping meals or even certain foods, if they make us feel uncomfortable or I wouldn't say kind of ill or poorly as such, but if we don't have a good digestive system, that can definitely have an influence on the rest of our systems. And that's definitely something worth bearing in mind. More serious things like Lyme's disease. So one of the things that I'm really conscious of in my local area is that we have lots of deer and sheep in the area, and certainly the deer are very prevalent in the woods where I walk the dogs. So I am very I keep on top of their flea and tick treatment because I'm really worried about Lyme's disease being transmitted to them. Something which when talking to my dog's canine osteopath, who was also a human osteopath as well that treated me, we talked about the fact that when there is tension in the body, the osteopathic approach, by the way, looks at muscular connections between the neck, shoulder, and mid-back that tie to the skull. And one of the things that connects the chest with the head is the fascia or the membrane. So if all of that is quite tight, one of the things that we discussed was that when it's tight in a human being and we have adjustments made to make ourselves feel more comfortable, is there any reason why that couldn't be the same for the dogs? And from his perspective, he thought that physiologically speaking, they're not that much different. So yes, absolutely. If they are tight or sore in sort of the upper neck going up into the skull, or indeed across the shoulders and the sort of neck and mid-back area, that yeah, they could be suffering from headaches and things as well. And of course, when I feel like that, I can communicate that, but that's obviously much harder for our dogs to be able to do. And certainly a good border collie is not going to turn around and go, do you know, I feel a bit headachy today. I don't think I really fancy going out for a walk, said no border collie ever. So that's something to bear in mind, that just because they might not be feeling 100% doesn't necessarily mean that they will refuse to go out. So we can't always trust their judgment on whether or not they are, in a good place to go out and about. And of course, if it's long-term chronic sort of underlying pain, then, they just learn to live with it, don't they? Now, if you've heard me talk before, you'll know that I talk a lot about border collies and other herding breeds as well, being very good at dot-to-dot puzzles. All right. So collies are really quick learners. And in my experience, puppies are rarely frightened of thunder or fireworks. But this is where their superior learning both, works against them as well as, how it can work in their favour. Because if it makes them a little bit anxious and then it happens either frequently or, with regular, like with fireworks, that it happens, when it's, I'd like to say just on fireworks night, but it doesn't tend to just happen on fireworks night, does it? It will happen, when it's dark and somebody has a birthday or a celebration or something. But if they can do that dot to dot of when these conditions are there, then sometimes I hear thunder or sometimes I hear fireworks noise. And with the barometric pressure, if that starts to change, one of our dogs, Moss, definitely gets a little bit worried if there's very heavy rain. Not necessarily because thunder is predicted, according to the weather report, but it reminds her of the fact that that's like thunder. It's like the conditions that cause thunder, and that's something that worries her. So, thunderstorms, of course, throughout the year, depending on where we live in the world. And fireworks, I think we can all say we're going to hear them at least twice throughout the year, aren't we? Hopefully less, but yeah, likely at least twice. And as I say, weather conditions and changes can help them predict the sound before it happens. And then that can start to build anxiety before the event actually happens, which, as I say, just all feeds into this picture of, getting worried about sounds. So then it becomes not just about the fear of the sound itself, but also about the anxiety that the sound might happen as well. So I want to give you some practical things today to do. So things to investigate. In case I haven't made it clear, pain as a contributing factor is definitely something that we need to rule out. And pain is a really complex beast, because what affects one person or dog might not affect another. And certainly the number of times that, either I've gone into the doctors or, I've taken my dogs into the vet. And I remember once when I was giving birth, the midwife telling me that no, I wasn't that far along. I wasn't in so much pain that I needed an epidural. Um, and as it turned out, sorry, this might be too much information for people, but I was 10 centimetres dilated. I was about to have the baby. So, yes, just because I wasn't screaming and making a big deal about it didn't mean that I wasn't in pain. I jolly well was. But this is the thing, because it affects people differently, and it's the same with dogs. What affects one might not affect another. We can't necessarily go, say, a vet has noticed bony changes or something on an X-ray, and they might say, well, that's not going to, cause a behaviour problem. We don't know that. It might affect that dog, but it may not affect another. We have to look at it case by case. Now, good structure can definitely create a healthy, happy dog. And poor structure can definitely create an anxious and happy dog. So looking at our dogs structurally is really helpful as well. Generally speaking, Border Collies tend to be quite happy, healthy animals. But yeah, having something like a poorly developed rear end, it might mean that we need to do more work in terms of building muscle up. And indeed, that can be in terms of like physio treatment, osteopathic treatment, that kind of a thing. It isn't a question of Vodka doesn't have, for example, the best back end. When she stood, you can see that her front end she's got a beautiful structure at the front end, but not so good at the back. It doesn't mean she has to be an anxious and unhappy dog. It just meant that I needed to do more work in making sure that she was physically as comfortable as she possibly could be. The other thing that if you've heard me talk, and if you're in any of my online training groups, you'll know, gut health. Gut health. It's an important piece of the puzzle. We love Holly Barker, who has a Facebook group called Sports Dog Nutrition, which I will link up in the show notes. Gut health is really important because the scientific studies which show the links between gut health and mental health are huge. So, it's a bit chicken and egg. Is it because we have poor gut health that we have, poor mental health, or is it the other way around? We don't know, and it doesn't really matter. But what we do know is that if we have some gut health issues, that we really need to investigate them and do our best to support our dogs in that respect. So, in terms of improving or solving the issue of noise, extreme noise sensitivity in our Border Collies, desensitisation. Okay, so we can desensitise our dogs to loud noises over a period of time. So if we have dogs that are frightened of fireworks, now is not the time to do that, I'm afraid. At this point, we're sort of belt and braces, and we're going to just have to look after our dogs as best we can. But as we go into sort of the spring and the evenings start to get lighter, that's when you might start a desensitisation program to help your dog become more comfortable with loud noises over a period of time. The other thing that we can do is we can change the negative association. That's what we're going to be doing, changing the negative association to a positive one. Because at the moment, the loud bang may well make them think that the world is ending. But as I say, we can potentially pair it with something delicious, and we can help them feel more comfortable about it. As I say, it's a gradual process, and it can take months. So it isn't something that unfortunately we can start, today and work on. But that's something for future that we can take forward. So medical interventions that can be helped for dogs that are struggling are things like Sileo. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that entirely correctly, but it's spelled Sileo. That's a oromuscular gel, which is often used in noise sensitivity. I'll link that, as I say, in the show notes. Dietary changes can make a difference. So if we have a dog that is running a little bit hot because of the diet that they're on, and maybe they're not entirely comfortable in their gut health, making dietary changes can just generally make them feel a bit happier, and their overall well-being is improved. Things like supplements, of which Holly Barker is the lady to turn to. Herbal and homeopathic stuff is important. I've been recommending a book by Caroline Ingram to some of my VIP students recently about using things like essential oils as potential comforters to dogs. So I'll link, as I say, that book up in the show notes as well. Plug-in diffusers such as Adaptal or Pet Remedy, these are definitely things that if your dog does struggle with noises, I would think about having those in straight away, because those are things that you can tangibly do to help. You can also use those scents on bandanas or collars if they do seem to make a difference. My suggestion would be have the plug-in diffuser on for maybe a week or so to see whether or not you feel like it makes any difference. And if you do start to use the scents on bandanas or on collars, I would start by making sure that, if the dog's bandana is off and you kind of offer it to them to smell, that they don't, get anxious, retreat, or want to move away, because obviously we don't want to put a bandana on a dog that with a scent that doesn't make them comfortable. And of course, those bandanas can also, take essential oils as well. So that's something to explore. I'm a big fan of Tellington Touch. I have a really good friend, Tina Constance, who does some amazing work around Tellington Touch. Thunder shirts and body wraps are definitely things to explore. Again, one of the things I would say is that they work really well with some dogs, and in other dogs they can make them feel a bit shut down if we don't do any work before introducing them. So if they are already getting a little bit worried about the fact that thunder or fireworks are happening, it's best to work on those things away from the scary noises, and then bring them in, hopefully to help provide comfort. And then lastly, we do need to look at tracking progress, because if you're going to try all of these things, then we want to make sure that we're making some progress. Otherwise we're just throwing things in and we don't know what's happening. So we want to compare like with like. So I might suggest like in a diary keeping session of a Monday to a Sunday, how many times a week did that dog bark each day? So you just have every time you note your dog barking, you have a little notepad on your desk and you just make a note of it. And then you change something like adding some sort of herbal supplement, or plugging in an adaptil, and then you go over the next week, assuming that it's relatively similar. You make that same thing, and then you're comparing like with like, and that's how you can tell what's working or not working as well. Right, guys, that's it for today. Thanks for joining me. I hope this episode gave you an extra boost to make a difference to your collie's behaviour. Today's episode was sponsored by my Border Collie training membership, Collie Culture Club. In the club, you get video training review, community Facebook group, and Facebook Lives for Q&A, just like this one, as and when needed, as you have a question for me. And don't forget, you can find information about this and all the resources that I've mentioned in the Facebook group, so head over there now if you would like to check those out. Next episode, we're going to be exploring reactivity towards other dogs, or what we fondly refer to as having big feelings about other dogs. So stay tuned. So until next time, stay focused on progress, not perfection. And remember, every small win counts.